gives sorry, it gives a, it's going far too fast. It gives the idea that the school is for more than 8 hours a day, more than 16 hours a day. It's a community facility that is there for 18, 24 hours a day, and it's very, very important to think about it like that. My next principle really is developing child-centered learning, which you are making extraordinary headway towards doing. But let me just add my comment to this. I was reading something that my grandfather wrote 100 years ago in the 1920s. And he said that the most important thing about being a teacher was that you were lighting fires, not filling pots. Now, what does that mean? It means that his belief is that with any child, there is the spark of inspiration, of curiosity, of creativity that needs to be nurtured to actually create the fire within the child. And most education then and now is still filling pots. In other words, put facts into the brain of the child so that you can actually then reassess them through an examination and figure out how many of those facts have been absorbed. So we are here as teachers, you are here as teachers, and I'm a teacher as well, to actually light fires, not fill pots. It is important to actually believe in the innate curiosity of the preschool child. It's important to work with the idea that teaching is a very collaborative effort, as everybody has been saying, including all recently. And of course, not to forget that at a later stage of education, this is a school that we've been working on in Yali in Bulgaria, which is a secondary vocational school, is exceptionally good at training carpentry students, male and female. It's a really, really exciting secondary school. And I think it's important that we think we aren't just training children for university and academia. We are training them for really high quality craft education and vocational education experiences. My third principle is that we have to design for flexibility and adaptability and for the long term. I've seen schools that are building buildings one a year, and this site has to be able to accommodate that construction. Children can learn from that construction, but it is really important to think of schools being building sites until they get completely full up, and then perhaps you have to rebuild them, as Mulder has been saying. So this is just an idea of how you might think about a 10-year term of construction on an open site. And this is Mike Girondi's school, and he has shown how it is possible, really possible and really easy in Mike's situation, to add an extra floor on the whole of that building. And so within 10 weeks, he produced 28 classrooms, 2 IT laboratories, and a solar photovoltaic system on the roof. In 10 weeks during the school holidays. And that is because he thought 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it was a good idea to build foundations fairly strong. So very, very important to think long term. And living with the landscape is something that we'll explore more. Ollie, who is with us in the front row, has contributed to the design of the landscape section of the book. It is obviously so much more important, as everybody has said, that people are surrounded by greenery in the landscape, that you can look out onto a vision like that. But as someone said earlier, the health-giving aspects of landscape in terms of reducing pollution, we really work with that. And also to understand the specific qualities of the site. You know, this is one of the first schools that we built. This is Patrick's school. Patrick is here somewhere in the audience. Down at Lake Bonioni, you know, so we designed a community building that has this miraculous view out over these 19 islands in the lake, but also dealing with this essence of the site there, which is a very, very steep-sided site. Fifth principle, going very quickly now, Designing for climate change. Here you see in this nice classroom at Urbano School, the principles of natural light that we talked about earlier, the principles of natural free ventilation, acoustical isolation, and insulation on the ceiling. It's very, very important that we address all these issues. And my next principle is the one that often gets left behind, which is water and sanitation, health, wash systems. And it is possible, as we have done in a dozen schools in Cavalli, to very easily retrofit fresh water for all children at time. And it's very easy to make delightful toilet blocks like that one on the right-hand side, you know, which are carefully positioning and the design was carefully considered. Inclusive design has been talked about. I won't touch much more about it other than ramped access is something that has to be considered from day one. And also the importance of female education, catering for girls' menstrual needs is very, very important for us. And finally, but not least, is managing maintenance of the school. And we find, and this is a slide on the right is from one of Felix Holland's schools. Felix is here, he's been helping us a lot with the design guide. Shuttered windows with security bars are quite often so much more maintenance-free than glass windows and work extremely well, as you can see here. So you don't need to think about solutions from the global north and just using robust and local materials to minimize maintenance. So this is just very briefly, how am I doing for time? This is just very briefly what we've been through with the chapter headings of this school design. I said chapter headings, there will be a publication, but it will also be online. So hopefully it will be an online resource that can be developed as time goes by. And this is our client base, if you like. This is who it's for. It's for teachers and proprietors and developers, as well as architects and engineers and students. And this has already been tested in working with Alex in Zimbabwe at the University of Rwanda and his students. Some of them are here today. So a few slides on each of those headings and a few questions to the audience in order to respond to us, hopefully in due course. Site planning. It's too complicated to talk about in detail, but basically when we design a school in the UK, we have a schedule of accommodation that is just printed out from the Department of Education. So that bit of life is very easy for us, but it's a very important process to go through to decide how many classrooms, how many laboratories, how big is the gathering space, how big is the kitchen, and how to provide for the wash spaces, for admin areas, etc. What's the size of the external play areas, the sports fields? Often they're the biggest land take, particularly in cities, very difficult to accommodate. And think about access and parking and stormwater drainage and landscape and biodiversity, even food production, which we see in a lot of the schools that we've looked at. So all of those issues come together to tell us that actually it would be quite good to have a site of approximately 10,000 square meters for a school of 670 pupils. Now, that often isn't possible. And so what we have looked at is a range of schools, and these two schools are exactly the same population size. They're both schools of about 450. One is in a rural area up near Gulu, and one is right in the middle in St. John's in Kampala. So it is possible to create urban schools in dense urban areas that are real oases of calm and of educational value. In very small site areas, and Mike is the one that's going to end up going to replace this school in due course, although it's a delightful school, but it does need new buildings. So building on a confined site is something that we can do. It's obviously a different set of characteristics. So these are my questions to you in terms of site planning. How big does the site need to be? Particularly in terms of area per pupil. Think about that from day one. How do we deal with delivery and access? Getting those things right from day one is very, very important. I was talking to Jacqueline earlier about the fact that Many, many schools in this country are built without any architectural input from day one. A week's worth of input from an architect asking these questions will help you if you're a proprietor of a new school. How do you plan for increased car usage over time? It is probably going to happen. We're trying to reduce our car usage quite successfully in the UK, but it's very difficult. How do we get design for ongoing phases of construction? How do we make the most of the qualities of the site? I've seen schools, we saw a school in Rwanda where they just went and clear cut all the trees before they started planning. It's not the right approach. So the building program, how do you define the size of the classroom? We've been talking about this earlier on as well. Again, this, you can't read this, but this is the kind of table that will go into this school, which actually talks about the proportion of each space that you're designing, given the number of children that you're designing for. That's primary, that's secondary. Again, these are based on our experience, but let's not forget, obviously, sports areas and the importance of play as an education device, creating play areas, particularly in younger schools. And the classroom itself, I mean, these are a couple of classrooms that sort of fit the model of group learning that we were talking about earlier. And they're classrooms where the environment, I think, is contributing to the quality of the learning, as Mugda was talking about just earlier. And these are our versions of part of a school where we're working in Kigali with Felix Holland, a range of different ways of occupying a classroom. So it is possible for everybody to, with good furniture design, just to have 45 children facing the front, but equally you could have them facing each other in a kind of debating format. You could have them around tables, which allow for group learning and one child learning from another set of group, and also even in a kind of conference format, where and changing the format on a regular basis can be a really useful thing to do in the hands of a very good teacher. Outdoor learning, different scales. Obviously, there's such a benign climate up here. We're very, very jealous coming from England. Oh my God. So it's useful to have these outdoor spaces that can be used for whole school gathering, but for small group learning. And the gathering spaces, well, it was Luke Kahn, for the architects amongst you, Luke Kahn said, all learning begins when two people sit under a tree and talk to each other. And that's you can extend that out to create a classroom under a tree here. And again, at the Belgian school, the little community space that we built there that is a physical gathering space for the whole school. But this, which may look absolutely vast, is a gathering space, an assembly hall for a relatively small school in Kigali, which is designed that big, really, in order that the school can use it for other functions that are beyond what is necessary for the school. So they can make money out of this by renting it as a space that is used for weddings and gatherings. And I think that is a very, very important thing. I mean, in the UK now, all the school, we have to think about ways in which you can help fund the use of the school by renting it to community groups. I hope we're not paying for this place, but I don't. And I won't go into this, but thinking about cooking is quite often, it's certainly in the rural schools, the most expensive energy user in the school. So getting the needs of the understanding all of this technology that helps you reduce energy consumption in schools is really, really important. And of course, learning and library spaces, IT spaces is something that we have been talking about. It's important that the library is still a place of sanctuary and of refuge and of individual learning, but also it opens up to group learning. And Laboratories, we designed a kind of standardized laboratory, which we think is cheaper than most laboratories that we've seen, because quite often they are one of the most expensive spaces in the school. But we have seen really good quality laboratories, which we have noted and are in the book. And the administrative spaces shouldn't be left out of the equation. It's important that they are not, I think, too excessive and too elaborate. What the most important room in a school quite often is the staff room, where the staff can get together and compare notes and discuss their approach. So that is very important, and it's very important to have a welcoming front entrance to the school. So in the building program, what are the questions for you? Well, what is the optimum class size, classroom size? I can tell you what we think we are recommending, which I'll tell you, which is around 63 square meters, which happens to be the size of a large English classroom. We would put 30 children into there, and we understand that in the short term at least you may have 45 children in there. But I think as soon as you go above 45, you will be really seriously affecting the education of the child. So, I think keeping the classrooms, class sizes down is really important. What's the best way to create a whole school gathering space? It could be just a tree, sitting under a tree. What's the future impact on IT? Big question for those of you with more expertise than me. What are the optimum space standards, the dormitories? I think we're going to come on to that. I think there's specific discussions on that on Thursday. And what's the best type of classroom furniture? Because that is the key to unlocking flexible education. School landscape, we will discuss in more detail in the session immediately after this. Oliver's going to lead a talk about that. But it's very important to think about the way you use trees on sites, and also the ways trees grow. Buildings don't grow as that. Trees do grow, and you have to think about that in terms of them becoming quite dominant in a space. Food production has been, in our travels and visits, we've seen really interesting examples of food production, obviously for commercial purposes in school. Very important to think about, as well as just growing herbs adjacent to the kitchen, which is obviously enriching the food. And thinking about landscape of play, which we'll go into in a later session, and the landscape of water and drainage, which is only going to get more and more problematical with climate change as the exceptional downpours increase. So questions for you again, is the outdoor landscape open to the local community? We've seen really good examples where that works, that really works. There are security issues, but play areas, having children coming to use the play areas on a Saturday and Sunday is just exceptionally good for the community. It works really well. What are the challenges of food production? I've mentioned that how do you design for rainwater collection, as well as drainage, what are the barriers to accessibility and inclusion, which we have to think about, particularly in the landscape. It's a very good examples of it here, done very well. The wraps it into the cascading landscape there. And how do you increase biodiversity and landscape quality? Biodiversity is a buzzword that we in the UK, we have to provide with every single building we build. We have to guarantee 10% biodiversity net gain. I mean, it's become a sort of fashionable thing, but it's really, really important to think about not just planting the odd tree, but thinking about providing spaces for nature. The next section I'm almost there is materials and construction, which is largely produced for us by Felix Holland's team, Local Works and Edson Mugabe. And what we're looking at here is the simple construction of single-story buildings. And there are variations on this, but basically this is what most schools in Uganda, in rural Uganda, look like. Now, how can you do that cheaper? Because everybody has said we have to do it cheaper. And how can you do it more from a more economical building perspective? So maybe a shorter building process. Does fabrication have a role in that? And then thinking about multi-story schools, we've seen this is Kerembere in Kigali, which is a really good, very small footprint school. Obviously very different in terms of the engineering constraints, but very simple series of 3 floors and balcony access, etc. And different ways of thinking about how you can use the roof, etc. So, complicated diagram that it will be available for you to look and think about, but thinking about the whole life carbon of a building from before you make the materials to after it is demolished. It's important to think obviously about the operational energy, the lights that are on in this room, which I don't see why they're on, but you know, the operational energy is very important, but the embodied carbon is much, much more significant. Because it's, because as people have said, as Benoit was saying, 8% of global emissions come from producing cement. If we can get cement, if we can reduce the cement content of a building or omit it altogether, we're onto a winner. So all of this is telling you just we have to think about materials in a circular way, and we have to think about operational as well as embodied carbon. And this is the kind of matrix that we're putting into the book about the advantages and disadvantages of material choices. And this is where we think, encouraging people to think about different aspects of the design. What are the low-cost, low-carbon alternatives to foundations, floor slabs, walls, windows, etc.? And also, while we're talking about materials, not to forget the beauty and the impact, I think, on education and working with natural materials rather than artificial materials. And this is this beautiful school in Terakoya in Kampala, if you haven't seen it before. Also, as was mentioned earlier, it's important to add colour to an environment, not to dominate the environment, but to make it part of the richness of the environment. So, how useful might prefabrication be in the building process? We're going to talk about that later. What locally sourced materials are available? Should foundations be designed to take additional floors? Obviously, I think they should. How can we minimize maintenance, and how can we reduce carbon emissions overall in terms of construction? I think this is finally looking at the environmental services. Bioclimatic design means avoiding conditioning, using natural light, using passive ventilation, solar shading, and roof insulation. So obviously it makes sense to stop any solar gain getting into classrooms or minimizing it. Obviously it makes sense to enhance ventilation by passive means, and the easiest way is hit and miss bricks. And again, this classroom, which is exquisitely beautifully designed, I think, hits all those buttons of natural light, ventilation, and acoustical insulation. But also within the environmental services, I mean, Paul Chimera, who's one of our field workers here, has produced the section on the book that deals with environmental services, and will be leading a discussion later. Thinking about the future, not only of solar thermal collectors, but solar photovoltaics, and thinking about how you can get more energy efficiency into cooking, and how to bring a constant water supply, drinking water supply to the children. So my questions there: reducing the cost of cooking, ensuring quality and quantity of water supply. What's the future of solar photovoltaics? I can tell you that in my country it has dramatically changed over the last 5 years, and we anticipate that we are going to meet our carbon targets through wind and through solar. And solar collectors, solar PV from China, I'm afraid, is going to be the cheapest energy source in 10 years' time. Now, it's probably not happening here yet, but you've got a hell of a lot more solar energy than we have. And it's incredibly cost-effective in our country. And how do we design for expansion, and how important is grid connection? It is very important even for electricity, because we have to use the grid for solar storage. So the last thing is that this study would not have been possible without the collaboration of many, many schools that we visited principally in Uganda, also in Rwanda and other places in East Africa. And they have contributed to the final third of the book, where we're introducing a series of case studies, and we'll be talking about those tomorrow, where the architects and teachers of those buildings will be coming along and talking about their schools. And I think the most important thing, from my point of view, in terms of making this work as an educational tool, is to have really good inspirational exemplars that we can look at. And so that's a third of this guide is just really good schools that have been built and are operating in Uganda. So thank you very much indeed, and I really look forward to talking to you further about feedback on the guide.
Thanks, Prof. So, Prof, we have about 5 minutes before we break this into a very fast breakout session. As I asked for the QR code to go up, we could, if you already have access, share your question or comment so that we're able to pick them. But if there is a question in the room, quickly, I'll come to you. Since we have a lot of designers in the room, it should be quite easy to generate some contributions from the room. Again, please look at the program guide to pick a breakaway session you will be attending, and I will run through a quick profile on some of the presenters in those sessions. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much for that presentation. It's very educative. So my question is to do with like nature, and I talked about using trees very carefully. And it reminds me of a certain pavement we have at school, that if you're walking and you're not careful, you can fall because the tree roots grew into the pushing the pavers up. So I really like to thank you for speaking on that point. And I would really want to know, how can I put these beautiful trees in a space without, inconveniencing the pavers, or without the pavers inconveniencing the tree roots, something like that. Yeah.
Tree roots, you can't get more fundamental than tree roots, can you? I have the same problem in my back garden, actually. And what I do is regularly just add more gravel each side of the tree roots. I don't know, gravel is a relatively low-cost option, and you just you can't chop the tree root off. Don't chop it through it, but you can just allow it to exist, and you just have to accommodate the pavement to it, the path to it. And it's, I think you probably have to do it once every 4 or 5 years, just to raise the pavement a little bit. We'll talk to Oliver afterwards. He's a landscape designer. Wave your hand, Oliver. Okay, very, very, very good. Okay, this is the most difficult problem that architects and contractors face, is the trying to reduce the cement content of our buildings. So one answer to plaster is that you can produce really good plaster from clay and lime. You don't need cement. Now lime has a little bit of embodied carbon, but not anything like as much as cement. The other thing, in terms of foundations, where usually people put huge amounts of concrete into the ground, you can do it with local materials where you're just using stone or crushed brick from previous buildings, and a much smaller cement content to make that work. The other relatively high embodied carbon material that we tend to use is, unfortunately, is brickwork. Particularly if it's made locally, there's a temptation to say, well, we're going to go for the cheapest local bricks. The amount of carbon that's the embodied carbon in local bricks, unfortunately, is very high because you're burning wood or charcoal, which is giving off even more carbon than the than some of the lower carbon alternatives that the larger brick manufacturers will be using. So it's a difficult situation. If you were in Rwanda, Alex in Zimbabwe has just finished a really interesting analysis of the carbon in all the typical building materials in Rwanda, which probably isn't too different from Uganda, but it is something that you always have to watch out for. And if we have a discussion later with Edson Agame and Felix Holland of Local Works, they will be able to give you more answers to that.
Yes, thank you. Okay, yeah. Thank you. I am from University of Rwanda, and I'm finalizing my last year in architecture. And our final project was about investigating how school environment really how students behave in a school environment. So the interesting observation during our research was that anywhere you find a tree during a break time, there is children and there is students under tree playing, climbing, jumping, and so on and so on. And it was very interesting. And if children can enjoy the trees, that means trees are very important in our life. So, sitting here as a technician, we all understand the policies of landscaping, why we do landscaping, etc., etc. So, how students in primary school or nursery school can really also have some knowledge on these good things, like how can trees, like landscaping policies, be transformed into methodologies of teaching trees, of teaching children the good and how important it is to plant a tree. Just translating landscaping policies into methodologies of teaching children the good things of planting trees. So is there any way we can achieve that? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it's a great comment and a great concept. I mean, all I would suggest is get children to grow the trees. They grow very, very fast. And you can't, a seedling from an acorn or from it grows very, very rapidly. And I think it used to be part of my primary school education in a simple state primary school in the UK. We just used to go out and do gardening, and we have seen it here as well. I know it does mean that you need the outdoor space, but there can be nothing more moving and pleasurable for children than to see things grow, and they will have hugely more respect for the natural environment and for the enormous trees that then emerge. Does that answer your question? I didn't quite understand it.
All right. Anyway, we could make sure you sit together for just so you can get as many. Very quickly, Prof. Let's look at something you spoke about: designing foundations for the future. And someone says this is expensive. How do we convince developers it's relevant?
Well, it depends on the relationship of the developer, doesn't it? If the developer is actually interested in the future of the school, then it's what we call a no-brainer. He would think, well, my future is going to be a lot more secure if I can add an additional 30% to this building. I think if a developer has a short-term attitude that says, I want to build this and get out quickly, then you have a problem. But that's the sort of problem that developers all over the world have provide for us to face up to, and it's really, really challenging. I would say that it probably isn't that much more expensive Mike Chironde here would be able to tell us how much more expensive it is to build the foundation to take 3 stories rather than 2. But that's probably a separate discussion.
All right.
About 20% more in terms of the foundation cost, which is only, I would guess, about 15% of the cost of the building. So it's about 3% of the cost of the building to build that extra foundation.
And finally here, there's several questions. There is about 5, but I'll pick this. Can exploring options for more sustainable furnishing of rural schools, that is chairs, desks, and sanitary appliances, have a significant effect in reducing carbon footprint from operation of the building?
I think that's a statement, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. But
I agree.
oh, you agree? Clearly. That saves me a lot of time. All right. Let's again appreciate Professor Peter. Apologies again, we are running short of time and I want to manage the next session. So I'll do this very quickly. 2 things. Yes, at the back we apologize. We've had other screen for the people here at the front. You can't see most of the presentations, but they will be provided. Meryl and the team at Enabel say they will provide all the presentations. There is a request, Prof, for the book, the link to the book and the embodied carbon guide. So Prof, Peter, please share with Meryl so you can share the link to the book so that they can pick that. So any other material you need from the sessions earlier, again, do engage because that will be provided so you can follow the presentations. But also we have a YouTube link that is live and you can play back the YouTube link. It has actually the presentations. If you want to follow the entire session again in your free time, you can play back the YouTube link. Again, check on the YouTube, Enable Uganda YouTube page. Yeah? Enable, just Enable. Yeah. You will find the link for these sessions. So we are going to break out into 3 sessions. First session, special needs and inclusive education. In this block, on the yellow door, when you walk in, it's the door on your left. And then the second session on outdoor learning spaces is in the same area, the yellow door. And that room is primary with a screen. It has a screen. Please note that the presenters for each session will be there and should be able to kick-start this conversation immediately. I'm looking at the team to find out what time is lunch, so we know how to manage them. Do we say 1:20? 1:50? No, that would be too short. Frank, what time do we have lunch? Because we are going, in the next 3 minutes, everyone will be in their session rooms. What do we say, 1:20? But we'll be here, we'll ensure that the next session starts on time, at 2:15. So we will have a very short lunch. So session 1, special needs.
Me and will follow me, special needs. And our presenter, Commissioner Sarkozy, with me, will be part of that special needs. And Yahoko as well is here. So you follow me for those who registered for special needs, and we have them.
There you go. And then outdoor learning spaces and opportunities.
Thank you. We'll have Chloe Humphrey Studio and Oliver. Oliver? Yes, and we'll also have this session taking place in that block there we have is the primary school. So in the primary section, one of the rooms is there. So we'll be going to that space. You'll follow me.
So you follow her. Session 2, outdoor learning spaces and opportunities. And session 3, maintenance, safety and finances.
Thank you. Maintenance, safety and finances will stay right in this room. And we have Robert Chisalama and Dr. Ruchuchen. So for maintenance, finance and safety, please stay in this room. Thank you.
The timekeeper will be walking around those rooms to ensure you are out of there by 1:20. and then we'll meet here at exactly 2:15. Thank you very much.
Okay, you open your email. This is my personal computer. Yeah, you have to. I'm sorry. You have to send it to my personal email because like I don't have it. You can just outlook.com. It's right, fine. I won't give you my personal email and then it comes on that. No, I can't because I shared it on SharePoint. I can't email it because it's a video of 26 minutes. You just go to outlook.com. You can access your own. No, but I don't think you can. Yeah, you can. I do it all the time.
Somebody has it. Mariel, are you the one with my second mic? I can hear the mic. I'm just wondering where it is. All right. Laman, I'm looking for the second mic, so I know that's the one they're using. Is it on the mic? It's up. No, then it's not the one. It must be online then. All right, we are ready to start for you. That's with Mariel. How is she able to use it? Oh, she's on her phone. Yes, yes. All right, great.
Okay, hello everyone. We are ready to go. Kindly take your seats. In the meantime, as Doctor is setting up his computer, I will introduce him briefly. Dr. Ruchuche Anthony is a manager investigations at the National Building Review Board. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering, Makere, and a Master of Science in Science degree in Structural Engineering from Salford. He has extensive experience in structural engineering design, project planning and management, technical investigations, site engineering, technical audits, service level management, as well as civil engineering materials testing. He has worked as a site engineer and technical operations team leader with Orange Uganda Limited, a contracts manager at Ampas Technical Services Limited, an assistant lecturer of civil engineering at Belgian University, and as well as a technical advisor for the Swiss Contact Uganda. You're welcome, Doctor. We have about an hour for this session, so we have two speakers, so we'll split. So we take 30 minutes for both your presentation and questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So like I also said, I work with the National Building Review Board. I will take a minute or so to expound on what we do as a board. So the National Building Review Board is an agency of government that was established under the Building Control Act 2013. The act itself was operationalized in 2018, so we've been here for about 5-6 years. And our vision is planned, decent, and self-built environment in Uganda. So for us to achieve that vision, our core mandates are monitoring building developments, ensuring that buildings which come up have access by persons with disabilities, overseeing the activities of the building committees in the local and urban authorities. We do hear and determine appeals against decisions of building committees, setting and determination of fees to be charged for building control, as well as look into cases that come our side, involve complaints or accidents or building-related incidents that need looking into. So building control, just as an overview, we have land use management. You need a development permit in Uganda for you to set up a school, and this is purely physical planning. So the physical planning committee of your local and urban authority would give you that development permission, and then it can move to the building committee for building permission. So the local councils, the urban and local authorities are directly in charge of ensuring that we have sufficient permits for your development. Why building control? 3 tenets. Standards, to ensure that what we are putting up is to the standard, and those standards have been set, and they are periodically being updated depending on any intervening factors. 2, sustainability, which we've been discussing this morning, and we'll be discussing this afternoon and tomorrow. And lastly, but most importantly, safety. So the institutional framework in Uganda, we have the Minister of Works and Transport for policy, we have the National Building Review Board, oversight role, then we have the implementation being at our local and urban authorities and the building committee. My interest this afternoon is to trigger your thinking about just 2 aspects, and then I will hand over to Patrick to deal with the finances. The first one is maintenance. The 2 pictures there, the one to my left is taken from the university that I went to, that I attended, and at the time I entered that university, it was about 84 years old plus. The picture to my right is from also a school I attended, secondary school, A-level, and at the time I was there, it was about 92 years old. Those 2 structures are still standing, and they are still in use. Why do we think that us as designers, as people in the built environment, as architects, as engineers, as planners, we need to pay critical attention to maintenance? Because when we design structures in schools, when we design buildings in schools, the hope is that 92 years on, like I went to that school that I showed you, that building should serve the purpose for which it was designed. 80 years on, 100 years on, long after we've left this planet Earth, our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren should be able to enjoy these spaces that we spend time to design and resources if I'm a developer. So we must think of these buildings as having a life, that they are visualized, idealized, that we bring these ideas to fruition in the wonderful plans that we give out, that we construct these, that we realize these dreams, but that when these buildings are in service, we make sure that we're intentional at assuring that we have measures that return these buildings to as close as possible to the as constructed condition. Maintenance culture in Uganda, I don't know about our brothers from Rwanda and Tanzania and Kenya. Here I can say without fear or favor that our maintenance culture is very poor. Recently I was asking people to give me a local word in our tens of languages in Uganda for maintenance, and I doubt that there is any single tribe or language in this country that has a local word for maintenance. The closest it comes to is repair. But repair and maintenance are not the same thing. Personally, in my local language, there is no word for maintenance. So that shows you that culturally, maintenance is not part of us. And we need to change that mindset now, because without maintenance, the buildings that should last 100 years will only serve half or a quarter or even less of their lifespan. We are aware that the service life of the building will depend on what you will do to make sure that it keeps at the level at which it was constructed, which is at variance to the design life, which is more or less theoretical. The engineer says, I'm designing this building for 50 years. Strictly speaking, but the 51st year, if that building comes down, the engineer may say, but my design period was 50 years. But how many schools have you gone to whose buildings have been brought down after 50 years, just because the structural engineer said the design period was just 50 years. In terms of a legal framework, we have already within the provisions of building control, the requirement for maintenance, the building control regulations 2020, specifically place responsibility in the hands of the owners and actually makes maintenance compulsory. It also requires, and specifically reading from National Building Code, Standards for Construction 2019, the requirement for maintenance manual, which will come from you, the designers. The developers that are paying you for this work do not understand these things. So if you don't say anything, he will never know that it is necessary. So the maintenance, the requirement for maintenance manual, and for them to start thinking of maintenance routinely, even before they occupy these structures, is essential. The second aspect that I want us to think about as we design sustainably for our schools, for our learners, for the next 100, 200 years, is fire safety. The pictures there, I don't know if they are clear, they are picked from different fire incidents that we've had in our learning institutions. According to Uganda Police Force, Fire Prevention and Rescue Services, in the last 5 years, 2019, 2023, and this data is picked from the annual crime report from the Uganda Police Force, the average annual number of fire emergencies is 1,135. That is an average of 3 fires every day. Every single day, the Uganda Police Force receives at least 3 fire emergencies or alerts. And this is in a country where out of 130 plus districts, we have about 45 or 46 fire stations, 11 of which I think are around Kampala. So you don't want fires to break up in this country, because when they do, then the structure will burn. In these fires that are reported, we lose annually 59 people in these fire incidents. That's more than 1 Ugandan dying in a fire every week. But every week, on average, you have a Ugandan dying in a fire. Let's bring this down to schools. Of the schools, the last 2 reporting years, 2022 and 2023, 115 fires were reported. It's about 60 a year, which is already also at least 1 fire in a school per week. We recently did a survey in the RB in 123 sampled learning institutions at all levels and different categories to basically have a feel of their fire safety or compliance to the standards. And the key aspects in terms of fire prevention and control, the vast majority of them were actually lacking. Design aspects, we are glad that at least over 80% had fire exits. Access, in terms of a basic access to a fire truck, we didn't have many problems there. But concerns about fire signage, emergency fire signage, hydrants. In Uganda, when a police truck arrives at the fire scene, people want to beat the police officers, either because they have come late, or they have come and the water has run out after 4 minutes, or they don't have water. But by design, the fire trucks should come empty, because if they are full with water, with our roads which are congested, at what speed will they move? So we should have fire hydrants as near as possible to our institutions, so that when there's an alert for a fire, the truck comes and finds water as close as possible to your institution and draws the water and puts out the fire. Concerns like alarm systems, basic extinguisher systems are all lacking. And each of us, even away from just being designers, we are parents, we have people that we know who are in these institutions. So this should be possible. What are the causes of these fires? The 3 per day, the 1 per week in a school environment. Overall, and this is from data picked from investigations by NBRB, 2 in every 3 fires in Uganda is set up by humans, negligence or arson. It's not electrical, it is not lightning, it is not maintenance operations. It's fire that has been set either deliberately or out of pure negligence by the users. Let's take this conversation to the schools. That percentage goes even higher for schools. 4 in every 5, 80% of the fires in our schools are set intentionally or negligently by human beings. Now, this is not a behavior that we are going to design for. We need police to work out a solution for why people are setting our schools on fire. We know as designers, especially those in Uganda, that our legal framework requires and provides for fire safety, right from the selection of materials, from the provision for fire exits, for provision for secondary means of escape, depending on the usage of the structure. And we have standalone standards for mechanical installations and electrical installations to deal with fire detection and alarms and other considerations when we are designing for fire. So as NBRB, we've attempted an intervention aimed at ensuring that at least the users of this built environment are aware of their risk to these fire incidents. So we've come up with a very simple tool that we've called a fire self-assessment toolkit for schools. It's available online. If you even use your phone, you should be able to access that. firesafety.nbrb.go.ug. And our driving factor is to ensure that as a bare minimum, we encourage people to think about early detection for fire incidents, that when these fire incidents happen, we have as safe evacuation as possible, that we have first-line firefighting equipment available for evacuation, and then also attempt to prevent fires happening from the non-human actions. Like I said, the human actions is a police issue. It's criminal to set up someone else's structure or someone on fire, and we hope the police will help us in that aspect. It is important that our knowledge of our level of risk is ascertained, and that we have an appreciation of the level of fire safety within our buildings. So the tool is web-based, available both web and other version, and we are looking at things of accessibility, fire safety, and easy evacuation. And once you have put in the data and the questions asked, then you have a score at the end of it all, which gives you a feel that out of 100, if you're scoring 20%, you should ask yourself why. And if you don't have answers to that, then you reach out to agencies like NDRB, which are paid to ensure that we have a self-built environment to help handhold you to ensure that we have better and safer environments. So the rating parameters, when you go into the tool, we look at maintenance aspects, we look at accessibility and signage, the escapes, lightning protection, fire detection and firefighting equipment, obstruction, evacuation. In most of the schools we go to, when a fire breaks out, the majority are in dormitories. Dormitories are simply overcrowded. Now, of course, the designer will say, "May I design for 45 occupants of this dorm?" And then you go there and find triple deckers, and you have times 3 of that number. But the architect who designed for 45 occupants provided 2 doors because she's comfortable, that they will safely evacuate within, say, 20 minutes if they are 45 and with the access that have been provided. Now, when you triple that number, you're already interfering with the process, the design process at the beginning. Added to that, we have children in boarding schools. How many of you have gone and found the 2 or 3 doors all open? You'll probably find a door blocking what should be an exit door, all locked with a padlock. So when a fire breaks out, who has that key? It's possible the matron also was recruited that year, and the person who locked it first left the school. You're in trouble. So these are very basic aspects, but we need to start thinking about them if we want to have a fire-safe school environment. Also looks at things to do with power and water installation and the building materials themselves. So when you go to that tool, you can either assess it as a member of the public anonymously, but we've also given an option for the school management, and we think the school management should be interested in that. The reason we put anonymous is because when the school headmaster or principal scores himself 40%, he's not going to publish it. But we hope that when the parent goes for PTA meeting or visiting day, and he just assesses the main hall, then he or she can ask the right questions. We've had about 600 anonymous assessments in already, and the vast majority of that is rating the fire safety of these buildings in the band of 25 to 50, which is critical in our opinion, and that needs action. I want to leave us with just one simple statement. As users, as developers, as designers, let us remember that learning in our schools, now and in the future, can never take place if the children feel unsafe. Learning can never take place if there is a feeling of unsafety. And each of us here has a role to play to ensure that we have a safer environment in terms of fire exposure. I thank you. Wait, questions? Patrick, and then...
I think we can have some questions for the next 5 minutes. Yes. Architect Rana.
Is it afternoon yet? Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, thank you, Doctor, for your presentation. Basically, you placed a lot of emphasis on fire safety. I would like to request that in your rating system, one of the parameters should actually be crowding, because I did not see it there, and yet you hinted on it as a key problem. When I look, at the news, and I look at Lubiji, for example, the demolitions going on there, for me, that is a symptom. Okay, it is the effect of, I would say, government failure. In this sense, local government failing to control development. Now, on the school front, this overcrowding we find in schools, again, is government failure to control this issue. Some time back, I tried to see how the profession or me as an architect would help. And one of the ways I thought would be done would be an audit of the schools, an audit, to say that these are the Ministry of Education quality standards, the spaces, and this is what is there, so what is the gap that has to be filled to prevent overcrowding? But for one reason or another, I don't know why, it was difficult. It was difficult to I don't know how to say it, to convince. You know, first of all, you go to the ministry, they're like, CJ, are you on the short list? You go here, you go there. Basically, nothing is done. There's a problem, there are people who can help, but the systems are such that we are stopped from helping. You go, you get a master plan, you look at the quality standards, we have our building rules, we know the size of the classroom, the size of the dormitories, the size of kitchen, factor in the overcrowding and say that, look, this school has to do A, B, C, D to stop overcrowding. Again, it is distributed between ministries. Ministry of Works, in this case MBRB, then Ministry of Education, and then local government. So in that, in the middle there, that's why we have this deplorable situation. Just to conclude, my daughter who is in senior 4, there are 100 in a class, and senior 4 they have 800 students in senior 4, and that's just one school in the heart of the city. So that is what we are talking about. And maybe another thing, management, IT can be used to manage, I don't know. Yeah, thank you. So basically the question is, how can you let us help the situation? Because we are here, we know what to do, but nobody is engaging us. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take 3 more questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. My name is Anthony Wako at Uganda Matters University. My question is, what provision as MBRB do you have for a community that lacks a domestic need? For example, if you are to put a fire hydrant in a place where there is lack of water, you're going to use that fire hydrant for the domestic need. Okay, so where is a win-win situation? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor, for your presentation. My name is Kiza Sam Smith from the Ministry of Education and Sports, Construction Management Unit. You've rightly articulated issues, and I appreciate the research, different research carried out, and I'm dwelling on the safety aspect. We all know that in this country we are faced with the traditional secondary schools, and there are quite a number. Some interventions have been done, but up to that level where you'll be feeling proud that you've done justice. Some of these buildings have really deteriorated to a level that human accommodation really should not even happen. And when you look at the national budget, there's no vote for maintenance or to address the other aspect of safety. Surprisingly, maintenance and safety go hand in hand in some instances. We have a lot of asbestos in some of those secondary schools, which is an issue of cancer internationally. I'm sorry. Yeah. Now, I don't know what NBRB would really push us to that legal aspect, parliamentarians as you know, the law framers, into considering maintenance as a necessary evil into these school construction programs. Because you go, castigate the head teacher, says, but where do I challenge this aspect? So we have a lot of deterioration of our structures in secondary school, in institutions as per se. What is our effort in this as this very big organization? And I'm really proud of you for having set that stage.
Sorry?
Thank you very much. My name is Ahiriana Monica. I'm a graduate architect. I've checked out the reference you've given us on the fire safety, and the options seem to be available for school owners. How can I, as a designer, actually evaluate my design using the fire safety self-assessment kit that is there? Thank you.
Now, Ton, there are two people here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your presentation. I'm called Architect Brian Masiko. We are talking about maintenance. However, some buildings around the town and all over probably have even gone beyond the maintenance kind of situation. You'll find that some of them actually need to discuss a holistic format in a way of conservation, because some of them actually are beyond maintenance. They need rehabilitation, they need really a total retouch. What provisions are in place to make sure some of these facilities are actually restored and put back to better use? Because as you already mentioned, some of them cannot even be used or recommended for human use. And lastly, what measures are you putting in place for such irregularities in some of these institutions that probably we design, especially schools, where we design for certain capacities, and after so many years these have evolved and we have maybe tripled numbers, but we still have the same number of facilities or capacity designed for after that period of time. What measures do you have for such irregularities? Thank you.
Last one is from the Commissioner.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you, members, for your concerns. Some of them touch the ministry and government generally, and Mr. President, I'm going to help you answer some. Yeah, very quickly, Madam Architect, I think we have a general problem in the country. The general problem is we have a population, a very big population that requires education, and we don't have sufficient institutions. That's for sure. Then we also have another challenge where everybody wants to go to the same school. Yeah, last week I was involved in an inspection exercise, and it was targeting basically boarding sections of schools. The situation is as it is mentioned, or even worse. And the reasons given, and the reasons that when you're there you try to understand as a person, because we were even mandated to close some, we did, across the country. Many have been closed down. But I want to tie it in with the mandate of NPRB, that's one, the mandate of the ministry, and other players. You have that situation. It's not only in government schools, but also in private schools. The most affected being private schools. Because with the government school, you can say, yes, that's our capacity, we have overshot it, we cannot go beyond this number. Private schools,
we recruit students as many as they can get. So you will find overcrowding in dormitories. Some classrooms have been turned into dormitories. Stores have been turned into dormitories. Every available space is occupied. In safety, there are usually three aspects. As technicians, we have the technical aspects, design, construction, and the rest. That we try to do. But this is not a one-day event, it's a continuous improvement aspect. Yes, even where you think you have done your best, you still find room for further improvement. Yes, how do trucks, for example, access dormitories if there is a fire in the farthest dormitory? The school I went to is very big. From the first dormitory to the last dormitory is about 1 kilometer. And there are about 14 dormitories in between, with of course sufficient space and the rest. But how do you move from the first one to the last one? Are there connecting accesses that in case there is a fire in the last one, you can get it? Those are rooms for further improvement. And every time it is said, then you reflect on, for example, your school, if each one of us reflected on our schools. If it was a boarding school, can you access each and every dormitory in that school? Secondly is education. Education, education, and education. Do people know that they are actually in danger? Are people sensitized enough to know that they are living with the risk? The school owners, the school managers, in case of government schools, the public itself, the parents, students, learners, staff at those schools, at those institutions. Do they know? Now, that comes back to you, that your mandate puts you at the center stage to make sure that there is enough sensitization of the public for safety and generally for maintenance. I'll talk about the act which empowers you in the next seconds. The act that empowers you to do the work that you are doing. You are supposed to inform and educate and do that work to make sure that everybody is aware that they need to maintain their premises. And lastly is enforcement. If they don't do it, so what? Who does what? We did our work. My work and the rest that moved across the country were to issue closure notices. I did not have police, and the Ministry of Education is not a police unit. There are other bodies to do that. If I give you work and you don't do it, what happens? Because we issued closure notices, but maybe I would want to go there after 1 week or 2 to see whether actually those closure notices are being implemented. There is a problem of enforcement, of implementation. So we need to work together. It's not a one man's job. It's everybody's concern. Then lastly is where we are. Before we move to institutions, your own home, your own spaces. Do they comply? Food for thought. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Engineer. I will take 1 or 2 minutes to go through the questions, and then we allow Patrick to do the second part of the presentation. Architect Vanda noted, and I agree with you, the observations made, the situation is there. How can we allow private sector to help in the situation? I'm glad to have that commitment on behalf of
governor, and I hope that's the voice of Uganda Society of Architects, and we reach out, as NBRB at least, we shall reach out to the private sector. This is one engagement which is in that line, that we invited us here to interact with the audience on sustainable school design. Anthony, how do we deal with communities which have no water? Now we are talking about hydrants. Again, yes, that is a gap that we note while we are pushing national water and Ministry of Water and Environment have access to water in every part of this country. We shall not cease to talk about also the need for water, firefighting. I am sure that that school, before it was given a license, as a source of water. What we are saying is when you're planning for water for your school, have an access point for that time when someone who is not a student, who is not the staff, or someone who will have a truck and needs water for emergency to come and access the same. Mr. Mukiza from CMU, Ministry of Education and Sports, the issues of the asbestos and traditional schools and the budget, yes, I agree with you. Asbestos will come to that. As NBRB, we are also taking concern. I know that over 10 years ago, we have government saying all the asbestos sheets should be removed from our environment. We know they are there from our monitoring, and we shall add on to those that are complaining about the same and try to influence change in that respect. Where safety is concerned, I think cost should become secondary. And this is the message that we want Ugandans to agree to and join the fight. We're engaging parliamentarians. At least annually we have an interface with the Fiscal Planning Committee of Parliament. The first one was this year, and they were in shock that actually the built environment was this messed up. So we hope that we'll have more engagements, and not only just engagements, but tangible action in that respect. Senamiga from UMU, about the tool not being useful to designers. For now, if you're a designer, you can only use the anonymous stamp, because the one of school management is designed for school managers, and they will ask you detail about the buildings that you, as a member of the public, would not have. Mr. Brian Masco, buildings which have gone beyond maintenance, I agree with you. Like I mentioned in my presentation, buildings have a life, which means that at one time the building should be allowed to go. No building is going to last forever. So at some point the building will have to be written off and demolished, and you must plan for that. In fact, the law requires that you apply for a permit to demolish. And the reason is to ensure that you do it safely. About 2 weeks ago, someone was demolishing his wall in Injeru, and it killed someone. Another one in Ginger City, an old supermarket, Tata Owen. The person bought the structure and said, I want to put up a new one, and decided to demolish the old, and we had serious injuries for Ugandans. These are preventable if we do the right things. Capacity enhancement, how are we engaging the authorities? I'm glad we've had the engagement with the Ministry of Education, especially from the area of monitoring, the DEOs, inspectors of schools, to ensure and bring them on board, because that's their mandate. We don't have the mandate to close schools, but the inspectors of schools have that mandate. So we are engaging them, tell them that we have this data, we have these observations, we have issues in terms of the environment of learners. Please, can you make use of us to give you the information that you need to be able to enforce the law? I want to thank Commissioner Asaf once again, Engineer, for your contribution, and we hope that we can work together, each of us playing their role to ensure we have a safer environment for our learners. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. And we all note we have a part to play in this exercise as we go forward. The next speaker is Robert Chisalama, who holds a master's degree in education from Monash University, Australia, postgraduate diploma in educational technology from the University of Cape Town, South Africa, and a Bachelor of Science with Education from Makerere University. Before joining the Belgian Development Agency, Robert worked as an education officer for 11 years, and while at the Belgian agency, he has worked in several positions within the teacher training education project from 2012, initially as a field officer and currently as an sector expert for institutional development. He has seen well as a field officer for 6 years. Robert notes that he got exposed to several realities such as ad hoc finance planning, limited involvement of staff in the planning and budgeting processes, poor data management, lack of sustainable staff capacity development, and perpetual indebtedness of colleges due to limited innovation and alternative income sources. As in his current position, he focuses on strengthening institutional leadership and management in government secondary schools supported by the Enabel project. Welcome, Robert, to talk about finances. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. I want to thank you very much. I know what it means to present in conferences of this sort. Everybody chooses where to go, and we thank you that you've chosen to remain here with us and listen in. Those are my names, and that is me. And I was just reflecting. This afternoon, I want to speak to a very simple topic, which I've called creative risk-taking and sustainability of institutional infrastructure. We are going to look at the case of income-generating activities in NTCs. If you followed what Tom was mentioning, I noticed that in 10 minutes that Tom was here, the country director for Enabel, he mentioned budget cuts 4 times in 10 minutes. And as you are here, as architects, I've been following the conversation since morning. We are already thinking in terms of state of the art. State of what? The art. We want to see the very best that we have learned about, that we think can really work. And the rest of this afternoon, I only want to give you a bit of stories based on what we have done as Enabel, and show you how the dreams that we have while we are thinking of all these nice buildings can actually become a reality or a failure in the institutions. Okay. So I just want to talk about those few things. One will be the role of school leadership, and the other one will be financial resource prioritization, and then I will speak about income generating activities, and then the evidence from the colleges and the lessons learned. Of course, out of my experience as a teacher, I know what a lesson means towards lunchtime, and I want to remain as brief as possible within the 15 minutes that have been available to me. As Uganda, for instance, we have been in the month of budgets, and the time that we have spent personally working with the Ministry of Education, there is always one big word in May, June, and July as it starts. The word is unfunded priorities. They are called priorities, but again they are unfunded. And it's very difficult to speak about infrastructure and its sustainability without talking about resources. Actually, every time you draw your design as an architect, the next thing you are going to mention is BOQ. And what is embedded in the BOQ goes straight away to finances. And that's why we felt this is a very good session to add to the school designs presentation that we're actually thinking about. You'll agree with me that in the context of scarcity, improving efficiency to deliver quality services while containing costs is challenging every stakeholder. If you listen in to all the presentations this morning, at every one moment, the word is cost. Cost and sustainability. And so, as architects, it may be a nice thing to ensure that we keep factoring in the aspect of finances in the things that we're actually trying to build and design for people. I want to first speak to the role of school leadership. Dr. Kidwes mentioned leadership in the schools, And we know that school leaders are very important in the entire equation because we are going to design schools. And these schools can only run if they are leaders. And above all, in terms of the mandate from the ministry, the school leader, like the board of governors and the head teacher, are actually the accounting officers of that institution. And therefore, they have a big role in ensuring the utilization of the resources, including the buildings that you actually build there, but also in ensuring that they maintain them, because they are the budget holders and they prioritize that. So it's very important that we think through the role of school leadership. And I've had very many conversations here which were actually very good, where you're talking about engaging the community before you continue to construct. I want to give you just a simple example from a national teachers college in terms of the budget. This is a financial scenario from one NTC. The colors here may be very faded, but I can read for you that whereas all the sources of funding, what you see as brown there is the only source of funding in terms of government support, and the rest of the contributions are from the learners. Now, for those who are in Uganda, again, I want you to put this into perspective, that most government schools today are actually under use. Universal, secondary, education. And the catchword that people move with in the villages is that no cost, no paying. And what the government is actually giving is just too little to do everything. But we don't want the parents to contribute. When I mention this, I'm not contravening the government policy, but I'm only bringing to you the picture where the school leader is struggling to try and prioritize that little funding that's available amidst the other challenges. When you look at the side of the planned expenditures, actually the biggest expenditure in the NTC was on food. And only a small 9% was anything around maintenance. And even that one for maintenance was actually budgeted for bills only. Bills for water and bills for electricity. This scenario already builds a picture for you that indeed, whereas we expect the school leadership to mind about these buildings, to maintain them as somebody is actually asking, it is almost practically impossible if there is no prioritization of the resources and if there is nothing like an alternative source of income. It is out of that reality that brings us to the next slide, which talks about income generating activities. And here I speak about 3 forms of possible sources of income generating in an institution. When I talk about income generating activities, you can freely call them income generating projects of a school. And I keep thinking about it that indeed a school requires extra sources of income. But of course, again, Dr. Kedwes is here. She once worked in this. We know that a school is not a business entity. Therefore, most of the human resources we put in the school are actually for teaching and learning. But here we are saying a school needs to do some business, if you like. Some examples which we mentioned here come in form of, for instance, agriculture based. We know that many schools, at least real schools, I went to a school in Mukono there called Nabilyango, and to date they see a very big farm, although the industries wanted even to snatch that one. But a real school those days had all the way up to farm, a big compound, leave alone the hybrid schools. Are they hybrid? I don't know. Broilers of schools, like mushroom, in a setting. So, we think that many of the schools have a lot of redundant land sometimes, which they can actually use to grow a bit of the food that they can consume. And as they grow the food, out of the chart that I showed you, they can free a bit of the resources to be allocated to things like infrastructure, maintenance. There's also the opportunity in terms of service-based. Service-based, I like this because even Prof. Craig here was mentioning, how do we design buildings that could eventually be utilized also for other purposes, like renting out? I'm not sure, but I imagine even we are not here free of charge. We should have paid some money to the institution. If there is a wedding here, certainly they will pay some money, and so on. So, how do we utilize the spaces that we have created in the institutions to generate some sort of income? The other one is purely really commercial. Can we foresee having commercial pieces, premises, blocks within the institution? I was privileged to go to a university which had so many cafeterias, but none of them belonged to the university. All of them were being rented out to other service providers who could actually pay the institution. So practically, the university only provided the spaces, and whoever had his business would put it there, and that was extra income to the institution. As architects, as you're actually planning these buildings, can you go that extra mile to also encourage and inform these final users of the buildings that you're actually designing to think through in terms of maintenance? We have a sad story which eventually moved us to come to this. There is an NTC in Gulu which was totally refurbished by IDB, and they had a lot of electricity, a lot of water, and time came and all that became a new burden. The principal would be in the office and say, can you imagine? I was paying only a few shillings for these bills, now it's a lot of money that I have to pay. They kept now simply, you just close off the waterborne toilets, close them off, all those points. And in that way, we think these stories should inform and help us to plan better. Don't only think about that nice building that we are planning, but also think about how will it be sustained. These are just a bit of examples that we put there, and again they're also very interesting in a way. One is in form of the colleges were creating, making their own liquid soap to clean up the spaces. I want to tell you that those colleges where there is strong management, you find better maintenance with the same resources. And those where there is weak management, there is actually poor maintenance of their facilities. We had a contradiction. The people of infrastructure said we want, to use biogas, and we thought it was cutting costs of the institutions. However, the institutions we were giving biogas did actually not have cow dung to feed biogas plants, and we were trying to use animal fecal. And the perceptions of the students were they never felt comfortable taking the tea which has been prepared using gas, which is the result of the fecal material. And so the colleges had again to resort to buying cow dung to feed the biogas plant, meaning the cost we thought we were cutting was actually regenerated through buying the inputs. So we chose to stock each of these colleges with some cattle. And along the way we had the conversation, we are talking about carbon emissions, but again we are stocking the farms with cattle. That is food for thought. It is for you, the architects and the environmentalists, to think through. Are there any opportunities in the income generating? The opportunities, yes, are there. The colleges can ably earn extra income, which actually can be utilized. There is the other one, which is critical. You find that the people who actually most times vandalize the school infrastructure are the people in the community. But if they know that actually they're also utilizing the spaces in the school, chances are not vandalize it. So the more times you allow them to utilize part of the facilities, then that community engagement strengthens the way you work with them, and there's less vandalizing and stealing of your property. The other one we have looked at is that we want learners who are holistic beyond the A's in the physics and the math, and so out of being encouraged to participate in these income generating activities, they also get skilled for their future hereafter. What are the lessons learned? And I only want to give you a bit of evidence, then the lessons learned, and I finish. One evidence that we have now, for instance, is those colleges, even during this period when they do not have students, they will become capacity development centers, and they're actually earning a lot of money out of the good facilities that Enabel opened up there. When you go to Kabale, you go to Muni, you go to Kaliro, you go to Mubende, look at the spaces of the NTCs. They are now being utilized by UCC and other agencies for trainings. The other one, which has been actually I've already explained to you, is that the colleges are now able to sell off part of the produce from their farms. And that produce, whatever they get, is utilized again as payment of these other people who are not on the payroll. You realize that in Uganda, some positions, however key they are, they are not part of the establishment. So you have to outsource them to come and actually support you. And the monies for such a thing actually got out of some of these income generating projects. And we think that is a good thing, and a bit of it can be allocated to repairs. Lastly, the real lessons learned. One, if you noticed, my first slide talked about creative risk-taking. And all of us know that business is a what? A risk. And I've already emphasized to you, the core business of the school is teaching and what? Learning. For as long as you allow the head teacher to over-involve again in income generating, chances are other roles are being neglected along the way. The other one is, because you have invested resources in these income generating activities, it means you have to do a lot of monitoring to ensure that they can actually break even along the way. And we also see that the other critical thing, which I can't now jump because I've really emphasized this, there is no way you can detach infrastructure sustainability from finances. And I want to encourage you that maybe, as always, the final note in your designs as you write, also you could even add a small budget for sustainability, not only for the construction. I want to thank you.
Wait for this to load on. We only have 2 questions, then we go for lunch. We shall provide a link where you can ask some of the other questions and we'll document them. Thank you. Who takes? Anyone? Robert, you did a good job. No questions for you. Oh, that's...
Yeah, thank you. My name is Ngema, coming from Rwanda. It may be to run from your experience regarding those income generating activities, because in some of our schools we have such activities, but in most of the time when it comes to procurement, they are like accused to have that conflict of interest. If, for example, they have produced, let's say, an example of school uniforms, and then they said the uniforms inside the school, that conflict of interest sometimes causes the problem in the procurement process. I don't know what is happening here. What can you share as experience?
Thank you, Gemma. Any other question?
It's possible to appear as a conflict of interest if no further explanation is given. Because the issue usually is, do we declare, is there transparency in these processes? We have many schools here, when you get admission, the first costs are around maybe uniform and so on. But internally, that money is going to a particular teacher, he's a supplier. For as long as the school really clearly declares that this is production in the school, really there should be no conflict of interest, in my view.
Thank you very much, Robert. Thank you very much, Dr. Ruchuche. We believe we've all taken in some information, and I pray that going forward as designers, as engineers, as stakeholders on the other side of education, local government, will take in interest, and also on the side of the education team, we see how to advocate for maintenance, budget in our programs, budget in schools, and budget from the government to both co-share this activity. Thank you very much. It's lunchtime, so kindly let's go and have lunch. The other questions we can discuss while on lunch table, but I promise we are going to share a link that will have all these questions on. Yes. Thank you.
you.